So, welcome everybody to today's webinar, Demystifying the Skills-Based Organization Model. Now, we've got a very interesting webinar to discuss today. We're going to be debunking some of the myths about the skills-based model, the SBO model. Before we get stuck into today's webinar, I've got a couple of very quick housekeeping things to get through. So first of all, this webinar is being recorded. It's also being live streamed on LinkedIn. So if you can't make it to the end of the webinar, if you'd like to share it with one of your colleagues, you'll be receiving a link to the recording tomorrow. So check out your inbox for that. Also, those who are registered on LinkedIn, you'll get an email message as well tomorrow. Second of all, there are some polls, so I strongly encourage you guys to get involved. You can vote in the polls if you're joining on Zoom. If you're on LinkedIn, unfortunately, you can't vote. But if you're in Zoom, you can vote in the polls. So please vote in those. We're going to be discussing the outcome of those polls as well. And last but not least, we do have time for a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. So if you have any questions for our panelists, fire them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. LinkedIn, again, unfortunately, you can't do it on LinkedIn, but if you put them in the comments there, I'll try to get to them on LinkedIn as well. I've got it open here on my second screen. So fire them in there, and we'll get to them towards the end, about 5-10 minutes towards the end of the discussion. Okay, so let's introduce our panelists. I'm going to go left to right on my screen. So Eleanor, could you just give us a quick introduction about yourself, please?
Sure. Spent the last 14 plus years in talent development, talent management roles, started my career in higher education, transitioned to corporate learning, started a couple of business around this kind of area of work, really passionate about performance and just how can we be at our top best in organizations or in our businesses.
So thank you very much. And we're very much looking forward to tapping into some of your experience throughout today's session. Tess, could you give us a quick introduction about yourself, please?
My name is Tess Hilson-Greener. I have a company called AI Capability. We provide AI in HR. I've been working in the HR industry for about 30 years. I enjoy sort of helping companies to understand the difference, how different AI solutions map to HR.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Hannah, could you just give us a quick intro about yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Sherman. I'm a learning and development specialist. I got my start in the classroom as a classroom teacher, teaching in both public and private schools. Went on to get my master's in curriculum and instruction and parlayed that into teaching adults, getting into the learning and development space. So I really enjoy doing a lot of training programs in the HR and learning and development space. And I really found that was my true passion. So I'm so excited to be here with you today and talk a little bit with our colleagues.
Thank you. And we're honored to have all three of you join us and hopefully we share some useful insights with you all. Now, we do have a lot to unpack today. We're going to be covering a lot of topics around the SBO model, different things about continuous learning and company culture and different things like that, a bit of topics about AI as well. Before we do that, I'm going to launch our first poll, which is just going to gauge, is this going to preface our first question here. So the poll should be appearing on your screen now. And the question is, what is the greatest challenge your organization faces in transitioning to a skills-based model? Building a skills taxonomy or ontology, aligning the model with business objectives, gaining leadership buy-in, engaging employees, measuring ROI, or other. And I will be reading the questions out in full. The reason for that is when we record this, for some reason Zoom doesn't show the poll in the recording, so I'll be reading them out in full. And I can see plenty of votes rolling through, but it's not even quite half of you. So if you're just listening in, cast a vote, and then we will get into our planned discussion. Let it run just for a little bit longer. Okay, one more. Okay, one more. Keeps going. Every time I'm going to stop it, someone else votes. But I better stop it there so we can share the results, which should be appearing on your screen right now. So what is the greatest challenge your organization faces in transitioning to a skills-based model? 50% of you voted for building a skills taxonomy or ontology. We also had 11% shared votes for measuring ROI, engaging employees, gaining leadership buy-in, or other as well. We also had some votes for aligning the model with business objectives. If there was those other voters out there as well, if there's something that we don't uncover today, this is a great opportunity to fire in the Q&A, so hopefully we can get to it towards the end of the discussion as well. But let's jump into our first question. This one's here for you, Eleanor. We're going to be talking a little bit about the myths and misconceptions surrounding the SBO model. So the question here is, what are some of the biggest myths about the SBO model, and how do you address these misconceptions?
So I think a couple of things. I mean, three things really come to mind, and I'd love to obviously hear from Hannah and Tessa as well if they want to pitch in here. But number one is that employees will lose their ability to like have that fulfilling career, right? Like the traditional career model is out of the window, and it's like, what do we do now? We're no longer following a path and so on. So I think that's a big myth. There's a fear that it's going to threaten maybe the retention of employees and so on because it becomes very uncertain, right? And I think one thing we need to recognize is in this myth is that if anything, we see that people, especially younger generations coming in, but even I mean the millennials like myself and Gen X's and everybody else is really just looking to grow. There's a really great book that is now slipping my mind, but it's basically talking about, oh my gosh, it slipped my mind now. It'll come back to me. I'll drop it in the chat before the end of the webinar. But
yep.
It's around how generalists are going to rule the future, essentially. So of course, it depends on the industry and so on. But I think you see this in organizations today as well, that companies today want you to have different skill sets. So it's great to be like focused on one area, right? But these traditional career paths are just no longer an option. I always say comfort, stagnation are no longer options. So if anything, that myth is out of the window. I don't think it's relevant anymore. So if anybody's there thinking about that, I think we're just done with that. People want to grow. People want to diversify their skill sets. And frankly speaking, that's how you maintain relevance and staying in the workforce. The other one is that it has to be expensive, right? Which it doesn't. And I think that's the first excuse that we like in the leadership position say is like, oh, it's going to be expensive and so on, without actually breaking down what is it actually going to cost? How can we minimize the risk of spending too much money? How do we prepare the best that we can so we're not investing, we're throwing money away? And I think the key is to have a really clear strategy, or at least the best that you can, and apply this kind of agile methodology where you're just testing and experimenting with different things. So I think these kind of three. And then the other one is, these two. And then the last one really is just, it has to be this one size fits all. So it's like we have to follow this strict rules around what that's supposed to look like. And I think we just need to recognize that there's no such thing. Just that when it comes to individual developments for business growth, it really depends on the size of your company, what your company looks like, what is the profile of employees, what does your industry look like, how is AI and technology going to be impacting it? So again, so these kind of the three myths is the first one, of course, the career path is that it's going to go out of the window. The second one is it's going to be expensive. And the third one is it's one size fits all.
Yep. Well put. I'd just like to add, I just thought of one as you were speaking there. I think one of the common myths as well when it comes to the SBO model is that this skills will replace job roles. This is one that I've heard quite a lot, that is say like, oh, we're going to adopt this skills-based model, so we're not going to have job roles anymore, which isn't really the case. Obviously, skills are there to sort of define the work that's done, but at the end of the day, it's a collection of skills that define that role. Obviously, with better visibility and better understanding of skills, that can be a little bit easier to train and upskill and stuff like that. But yeah, this is one that I've heard that's very common. So that's but thank you very much for those inputs there, Elena. We'll transition a little bit here, Tess, and this next question is coming to you. We're going to talk a little bit about continuous learning, obviously, sort of taking this next step forward. Question here is, how can organizations integrate continuous learning into a skills-based framework to keep employees engaged and agile?
It's a really good question, because I think a lot of companies start from the end. So they start at, what skills do we have at the moment? What are our values? What are we trying to achieve? And they look at the strategy and their business objectives, and then start to look at the workforce. And a lot of years has been spent trying to map those skills and to put them into some sort of format. I always believe that you can do that through technology, and I've done that in organizations. We've started with the technology to actually be able to have some sort of repository for those skills, and then be able to map them to all of the roles within the organization and all of the capabilities around that link to values and everything else that drives the business. Now with AI, you'll be able to do that much more seamlessly. You will have an opportunity to have personalized learning paths, and people can really come in and hit the ground running. So from onboarding, from recruitment, from onboarding all the way through, that skills can be mapped continuously throughout the organization. And that makes it much more agile, because they can be updated, they can be mapped to all the learning and development opportunities with the company, mentoring, coaching, and any other areas that the organization is doing to support careers. And I agree as well that with what you were saying earlier, Eleanor, that I think people now have different expectations of work. They actually don't want to become they don't want to be out of value. They want to be adding value to their capabilities and their ability to be hired in different organizations. And they have to have multifaceted skills now. And I think that people have a lot more pressure put on them to understand and do more in their roles, because roles keep evolving. So I think it's important to have a very flexible skills repository that can actually support people and develop them in real time. And at the moment, people want to learn within 5 minutes. They want that information available there and then. So I think it's something that needs to be very flexible and very agile.
Again, it sprung to mind something that I'm just pulling up on my other screen here. This resource, which I'm just dropping into the chat now, don't mean to sort of do a shameless plug, but this is something like we actually prepared, explaining the difference between two of the terms. Actually, we don't have any questions planned on this, but two of the terms you hear around skills are skills taxonomies and skills ontologies. And taxonomy is basically like a register of your skills. It's a list so that you know the skills that everybody has. Ontology is a step further. So it's not just the lists of the skills, it's actually the interrelationship of the skills as well. This resource that I just dropped in the chat, it's free to submit the form. That explains in detail actually what that means. And it very much has to be an agile process, because skills aren't just a one and done thing. There's plenty of statistics. I think it's the World Economic Forum published a statistic about the half-life of skills. And you have some skills now, particularly with AI and technology, that literally can be out of date within 6 months. So you might have mapped your skills 6 months ago, and then, in 6 months' time, that training that you're doing isn't even relevant, that the technology is moving in a different direction. So this is why it very much has to be an agile approach. So yeah, very interesting stuff there. And I think that resource there will be helpful there to explain the concept a little bit further. I do believe, if we can proceed, we are at time for our second poll, still of 3. So I might launch that one on the screen now. And it's talking a little bit about the skill gaps. Sorry, that is out of order on my screen here. So there it goes. So yeah, this poll here is about identifying skill gaps. In the next part of our conversation, we're going to talk about that and how to sort of address that. So the question here is, what is the primary method your organization uses to identify skill gaps? Regular performance reviews, employee self-assessments, skill mapping tools or software, feedback from managers and teams, external benchmarking or market research, or other. It also could potentially be a combination of all of them, but as you put their test, this is something that isn't a one and done. This is something that should be continuously updated. And we're going to talk a little bit about skill gaps, business goal alignment and stuff like that, but I'll let the poll run for a little while longer. Plenty more of you voted this time around, so that's good to see. Let's see if we can get 100%. It's quite rare we get 100% of votes, so I'll let it run for a little bit longer. 75% participation, that's pretty good. Okay, looks like we're done here. So I'll end the poll, share the results, which should be appearing on your screen right now. So what is the primary method your organization uses to identify skill gaps? 38%, we have a tie for regular performance reviews and feedback from managers and teams. 10% for external benchmarking or market research and skill mapping tools, and then 5% for employee self-assessments. And I think that is a pretty good indication of the varying sophistication of this process. Basically, this is a rather sort of new concept, not new, but I mean the push towards skills based is definitely something that's become more prevalent. I think that's a good representation of different people's sort of stage of where they are. Hannah, I know that you've been waiting there patiently for a question to come your way. So this next one here is to you. It's actually on skill gaps. We're talking a little bit about business goal alignment. So the question here is, what are some practical ways to align an organization's skills with its long-term business goals?
Sure, and that's a great question, Justin. And what's really important here, first and foremost, is to, as an organization, take note of the long-term business goals. What do you want to accomplish as an organization, and what needs to be done to get there? And a first step that's really important is, as Tess was talking about before, conducting that skills gap analysis. And that occurs by you're assessing the current skills of the workforce, and then you're looking at the future needs in order to identify, what are those areas of improvement, what training and development programs need to be developed. And this is really lays that solid foundation for an organization to figure out what skills are essential for them in achieving their key business goals, whether those are technical skills, whether those are soft skills, whatever that might be, to help achieve that goal. And once that's kind of fleshed out here, new training programs is really important. You may need to reassess the types of training that you've done before. You can start to develop those targeted training programs that assess those specific skill gaps and they align with the priorities. As Tess was also saying, you know, these can be quick, super short, skill-based learning. They don't need to be this crazy long thing that people need to participate in. Quick, bite-sized videos to help close those gaps and move us toward that really effective, what are those top 5 things or top 3 things that we need to do as an organization? Now, everything's going to be linked to these goals, right? So we really need to look at that alignment here. So employee performance, as you just did in the poll, Justin, that should be directly related to the organization's strategic goals. And this really helps to ensure that employees understand, how are my individual contributions impacting the business? And how can my skills help our business grow and take us to new heights? We're probably going to talk about this a lot more today, but the culture of the business is so incredibly important. And this is where it's really, really crucial to foster that culture of continuous learning. As an organization doing the SBO model, you need to actively encourage your employees to develop those new skills, provide those growth opportunities, allow them to make mistakes, give them opportunities for professional development, give them mentorship opportunities. And what's also really important here is no matter the size of the organization, leadership really needs to buy into this and stand by it and promote it, because it's going to come from the top down. So if you only have a few employees that feel comfortable with it, it's not going to transcend the organization. So leadership, you need to help perpetuate this. And also communicate it properly. You need to communicate whatever that strategic plan is, whatever skill requirements are needed. Employees at every single level, be it leaders, be it managers, be it individual contributors, they all need to know what's going to be going on here. And also looking at those types of assessments and making sure that assessment is continuous. You need to make sure that you're assessing the effectiveness of those new skill development initiatives that we were just talking about, those new learnings. This is really an opportunity to track those KPIs and identify areas of improvement, because it's not going to stay the same all the time. You're growing, you're maturing as an organization. So making sure that you're stepping back, looking, reflecting, making some tweaks, and moving forward.
Well put, well put. I think I'd just like to add one additional point, I think, is when you were talking about it, strategic goals as well, but I think it comes down to the level, as you well put, about leadership buy-in and company culture. We're going to discuss that in a couple of questions time, but that's very important. But also it's important to think about the individual and their passions and the skills that they want to learn, and even potentially the skills outside of the area that they're actually working in. We have a customer that we work with, Orange, that one of the biggest telecom companies in Europe, and their CHRO explained the career trajectory less like a ladder and more like a rock climbing wall, because really a career trajectory should be going any which direction rather than just going straight up. So this is why, in addition to obviously doing this training, making sure that it aligns, you fundamentally have to make sure that this aligns with the person's interests as well, and potential interests that they may not even know that they're aware of, but they have some skills here. They'd like to explore that a little bit further. This is how it can help the business as well. So if you can get that sort of glued together, I think that's a winning formula for sure. But thank you. I don't know if Eleanor or Tess wants to add anything there, or should we move along?
Justin, can I add a couple of things here? Yeah.
Sure.
What I've observed, and I'm sure some people listening are like, yeah, definitely see this, is that companies tend to be reactive. So when it comes to skills in particular, but I think it goes deeper. So it's the actual root cause of the fact that we're not really ready as an organization. We tend to react is because we don't spend time planning for the future strategically. What I mean by that is, like, sure, people will get together and they'll be like, okay, what do we want to do next year? And that's it. Like, usually, very rarely do companies look way ahead of time. And obviously, depending on the size of the company and so on. So something that I'll borrow from John Sene, so he's a futurist, and I really like the way he puts it. Companies that succeed in the future, companies that stay relevant and grow, and are ready for the future, have two teams. One is the today team, and then the tomorrow team. And those two teams work together, meaning that you have a team who's a team of leadership who focuses just on, listen, operations day to day. What do we need to do this year? What do we need to make happen? And then there's the tomorrow team that's looking at what's going to happen in our industry 2 years from now, 5 years from now, and what are we doing to ride that wave effectively instead of just like drowning like so many companies find themselves, right? I mean, we've seen this over the last few years. We're going to see it more in the next year to 2 years as like all the different things that are happening in the workforce. So having the tomorrow team, I think, is essential beyond just a strategic team for today and the next year, but like 2-5 years from now. How much time are you actually thinking about that, and how much research you're doing outside? So that's one piece. And then the other piece I'd like to add is around performance. So I spend a lot of time in performance, and companies, there's a lot of talk about performance, but reality is most companies don't do it well. Reality is a lot of companies are still in that mid-review annual performance timeframes. And there's two kind of challenges there. Number one, many companies don't invest in their managers, which are the key to driving your employee performance, skill building, motivating the employees, leading by example, all of that good jazz. So if you're listening to this, number one, I would just audit how are your performance reviews and how are your managers? Are they actually having effective conversations? Are your managers coaches, or are they just kind of ticking the box, entering into the system? Because we can spend all day talking about skill building and so on, but if you don't have the fundamentals, the base, right, none of it really matters. So I think looking at your performance reviews, do you have mentorship programs internally? Do you have coaching? Do you have reverse mentorship programs internally? The effectiveness of those conversations, and especially in technical areas, I spend a lot of time in tech and very analytical kind of group of people that just don't necessarily have the skills to have a good conversation with their direct reports, which then everything else just really doesn't matter. It's just a waste of time and money.
Yeah, I just take it a step further. Actually, it's interesting. We just had this conversation earlier this week where we talk about training and the learning and development function as well. And as you said, oftentimes HR and L&D, and this isn't meant to sound offensive, but oftentimes it's a bit administrative. You're just ticking a box, as you said. It's not really strategic. Training is just done for the sake of training. Performance review is just done for the sake of performance review. And funnily enough, we're going to do a topic in the new year talking about rethinking the role of HR and how this function is becoming more of a strategic player, sitting in these boardrooms and these C-suite conversations as well. We're talking about talent, because when it comes down to it, if you're talking dollars and cents, the number one most expensive thing for a business is the people that work. So if you can get the most out of it, ensuring that they're happy and their well-being is good, it's only going to be good for the business in the long run. So very interesting stuff. And thanks for adding that there. We will move on a little bit here and shifting gears a little bit, talking about AI. And obviously this is something very close to your heart, Tess. So this question here is for you. So what role does AI play in supporting skills-based initiatives and workforce planning?
I think there's the main role is to actually put the technology in place that can actually host all of the information that you want to have on skills to start with. And AI can really match employees to roles, can match training opportunities. We've had an LMS, but this is an LMS on steroids, if you like. We're going to have something there that actually can be so intuitive that if people are doing performance reviews, it's capturing that information. All of this can be kept in one brain, if you like, and from that you can get real-time workforce insights. You can start to see emerging skill demands. You can start to look at proactive workforce planning, and you can start to look at minimizing any disruption in any of the business opportunities that are coming your way. I also think it's really important to think about the areas where in the last 30 years I've heard the same discussions many times. One is, why can't we get onboarding right? We spend a lot of money on recruiting people. Let's get onboarding right. And I've been working with my team to develop an AI onboarding process that actually helps people to hit the ground running and is really intuitive. So it assesses the skills, helps people to get the product training they need virtually. It's virtual training, but also all the way along the line, they've got coaching, they've got the complete support they need to actually hit the ground running. So I think that onboarding all the way through, we can start to see AI having a stronger role in helping to support people. But it's more about the data. I think coming from a techie background, I see that people never really use the data very well. That was the same with learning management systems, where people had all this information but didn't know how to share it or to use that information. With AI, you can really get a lot of information. And the last thing I'd say is that a lot of managers at the moment are using ChatGPT as a coach. They're using it to help them do performance reviews. It's helping them to put conversations together. Anybody who struggles to have conversations with their teams are using ChatGPT. And we're spending a lot of time with companies to put their own ChatGPT together, backing into their learning, leadership and management training. So the management tools are there. I think now companies need to embrace them and help people understand how AI can support them going forward. So I think it's a great picture, particularly around skills. It really will help people to see what skills people have, what's available, and help people to develop themselves much better, much quicker in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine, I mean, this is just to throw it back at you as well. I mean, everyone's is different in the way that they onboard as well. I guess everyone's kind of unique, and I think that can also be a benefit, right? If you talk about AI, it's quite customizable to every individual, right?
It's completely customized, a personalized program, and it really maps people's skills, identifies what they need. Product training can be however it's needed. You know, you can do it virtually, you can put them into vision rooms, you can have immersive training on a particular product. So it can be really, you know, tailored to individuals, but it can really help people. Like sales scenarios, you know, people can actually do on the spot product training in sales scenarios in real time. It's fantastic, and I think it's really good for people in the future.
Yeah, we heard one. I heard one. Our CEO spoke at a conference earlier this week, and it's a bank here in Poland, and they were doing training with virtual reality, but it was kind of, I can't remember the name of the game. It was kind of like Sims. So they had like virtual reality, and the audience was just like flabbergasted. It was only a pilot. They didn't have any results just yet, but they knew immediately already. It was really well received by the employees. So it's you know, it's not scary. I mean, it's exciting to think about the future and how this can change over time as well. Eleanor, you want to jump in?
Yeah, can I add something? I think companies should be definitely very excited about AI, and from just a financial perspective, I think it's going to make things more accessible and affordable for people, for companies in particular. I think another thing that's to be excited about is that with AI, so you have kind of like Tess was talking about, like an AI coach in your pocket, right? Like, so BetterUp has a model like that, where it's just basically like helping you. You have basically have an AI coach in your pocket. You have an AI coach along with like a real person. I think this AI coach notion is going to be growing and growing. I think there's still not enough evidence to see the results, like the impact, the metrics around what's the difference between having a human coach and an AI coach. But I think we're definitely, with AI, becoming more emotionally aware or emotionally supportive. I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, but you can kind of feel like you will start to develop a relationship with this AI coach, just like you would with a real person, because they're solving your problems today as an employee. And I think another thing that's really important here is that it's going to move away from, it's always like organizations need to do this, managers need to do this. What about the employees? And I think with AI and having the right set of assessments associated with each employee, so I think I mean, a whole other topic, but I think being able to assess what a person is on a holistic level, not just the skills level, because we know performance is not just what you can do at work. Performance is your financial well-being. Performance is your health. Performance is your mental state. All those things. We're able to assess an individual from that perspective and then help them take ownership, which is what AI will do. It will help put the ownership on the employee versus the manager being the jack of all trades, having to do their job. And then at the same time, they have to motivate, inspire, and lead a whole team of people. It's unsustainable. It doesn't work. We see it doesn't work in organizations. The big problem right now is the management burnout. So I think AI is going to create opportunities for that as well.
Absolutely.
For sure. I don't want to move any further without just sharing this book. Maybe just wanted to mention that one, Eleanor, the book that you mentioned in your first response, Range. Just sharing that with everybody. That was the book that you mentioned in the first question. So if you want to check that out. We will move on a little bit further. I'll stay with you, Eleanor. Actually, we're going to talk a little bit here about leadership buy-in, which Hannah actually prefaced a couple of questions ago. So the question here is, what are some effective strategies for gaining leadership buy-in when introducing a skills-based approach?
Yeah, so it's a big one. I mean, it's like with anything else, right? Who's writing that check, essentially? Who's going to invest in resources and money into this initiative? I think I think for folks that are listening, if you're in HR and L&D, I think if you haven't already changed that mindset, I think changing the mindset from being an executor to being a consultant. So I think in L&D and, you know, in our world, we're very much like, we're just like, well, here's what we, you know, what do you want us to do? Here's a program, you know, people come to us and like, here's what it is. And like, we just deliver. We don't ask, we don't question, we don't educate. And we need to recognize that we're the experts in the field, that our senior leadership don't always understand talent development. They don't understand behavior change. They don't understand the impact. And sometimes they don't even look at the financials, right? They look at the bottom line like, okay, but I don't think they understand the cost of inaction. So we spend a lot of times like, what is it going to cost us? What is it going to cost us if we don't do anything? That's the question. So I think creating a story around that, I think as L&D folks, and there's a lot of data, a lot of information around that. I think collecting as much data as you can internally, and you'd be surprised how much data you have internally that you probably don't recognize. So I think looking at data you have internally, research and reports that are out there around the cost of inaction in particular, like not implementing certain like SBO models, for example. I think that's another one. And frankly speaking, it takes time. I've worked in an organization where it took 2 years for me to actually change the culture, change the thinking. So to the point of Hannah mentioned earlier, culture is super important. That learning organization is super important. And change is difficult. It just takes time. And I think you need to just, you know, put your feet down, have the right data, the right metrics, the right numbers that leaders care about. Because frankly speaking, we can romanticize and say leaders and organizations care about skill developing for employees. No, organizations care about making money. They want to know how you're going to increase their revenue, decrease their cost, or minimize risk. If you can tap into these 3 areas and provide data around that, you're going to have the leadership sold.
I agree. I also think that having worked as an interim or fractional HR person, when you're parachuted into stand in front of the board and explain how you're going to use the budget and how you're going to use it effectively, I think it's very important to think of it as if it was your own money that you're investing, and to look at it as how you can show them a return on investment in regards to how you're going to resource it, how the budget's going to work, and the fact that it will be delivered, and giving them examples of how you've done this in the past or how other companies have done this and what success rates they've had from that, and give them real case examples. Because having sat on a lot of boards, it really is quite unnerving when someone comes in without a good business case to show why they're doing this in a well thought out plan about how it will be beneficial to the organisation, and particularly to down to the employee level and what they will get as well.
Awesome. Yeah, well put. We'll segue a little bit. Actually, we've touched on it's a perfect opportunity to talk about company culture, which is we've sort of dipped our toe in the water on this, but we'll go a little bit further into this here. So Hannah, the question here is talking about the role of company culture. Question is, what role does company culture and adaptability play in ensuring a successful SBO implementation?
Sure, and I think we've touched on this, you know, a lot throughout this discussion already, but to Elena's point, in most organizations, culture comes from the top with a leadership support. So, and it has to be more than just sending an email, you know, oh, make sure you do this, or, oh, we're transitioning to this model. It has to be a full buy-in. It has to be the backbone that we are all in this together, and leadership all the way from the top down needs to reflect that. If not everybody is on board, or there's, you know, side projects or side conversations, it's not going to be a fulfilling culture for everyone. So whether it's, you know, the ELT, whether it's learning and development, whoever it is that sends that message, there also needs to be accountability there. So not only is it a culture of, you know, adaptability, it's a culture of accountability, that after the first 30 days of this, we're going to continue doing this as a company. So you need to embrace adaptability, because it's going to change. You know, as Elena said, it could take 2 years. It could be phase A through phase Z, and everybody needs to have patience with that. And when you foster that true culture of adaptability, that's when those employees, to your earlier point, Justin, are going to feel comfortable finding what they're passionate about, embracing that change, being able to stretch themselves a little bit more, and finding out their niche, not only as it relates to the company as a whole, but to who they are. Maybe they never had the chance to explore a particular skill or a particular skill. If the company culture is saying, yes, we encourage you to do that, we're going to leverage your skills and your knowledge, that is when those employees are going to get excited about contributing to that culture. And something that we also talked about, and I just want to touch in a little bit more, is openness to change. As it is today is not how it's going to be tomorrow. So when employees and managers and everybody feels comfortable with continuous learning and development, they're going to be more open to accept more responsibility, accept more skills, and that mindset's really going to flourish. And this kind of goes without saying, but it is an important topic, is that there has to be collaboration and cross-functionality, because you may be working with somebody else who is, in the similar skill set as you, but they may have something to share with you, or you may see something a different way when somebody else is, another employee is discussing a particular topic with you. So you need to have that collaboration and communication. You foster that skills development across teams, and it helps to break down those silos that are traditionally seen, where it's like, well, you're in marketing, you do this, and you're in product, you do this. We're really helping to kind of break down those walls. And that results in employee empowerment. Ultimately, we want our employees to feel autonomous, to take ownership of their skill development, to take ownership of their career progression. And that really comes from a culture of accountability, a culture of adaptability, and a culture of feedback, right? As Elena was saying before, not just having those 2 times a year reviews. We're providing regular constructive feedback, and that helps employees identify areas of improvement, think about how they can stretch themselves, and be prepared for those conversations instead of just checking a box.
Yeah, I just want to add something it's very well put. It springs to mind. One of the things that we have working with customers, obviously we provide the skills mapping software, but it is a little bit that the accountability point is very important, because it is a little bit of a convincing sometimes when you're talking to employees, all of a sudden say, hey, we're going to map all of your skills, they're going to be visible. And the initial sort of human reaction is like, can be sometimes, whoa, like I don't really feel comfortable with that. I don't want other people knowing my skills and stuff like that. But if you tie in all the extra things, as you said, regular performance reviews, really buying in from the management and from senior people, it's going to take time. It's a process. Obviously not going to happen overnight, but it doesn't work if you just demand something of your people and then there's no connection between the two. People are going to be put off by that, basically. So accountability, I think, is a very, very important ingredient in that recipe for sure. So sorry, I just have something stuck in my throat. Okay, we will move a little bit further. Just a quick reminder here as well, if we do have any questions for our panelists, you can fire them into our Q&A box in the bottom. If you don't want to ask it, you can also drop us an email at hello@devskiller.com. Be happy to answer that afterwards via email as well, so feel free to do that. But I will bring the conversation back towards you, Tess, and we're talking about all these concepts and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, we need to measure it at the end of the day. This is the important sort of final piece of the puzzle, basically. So we're going to talk this question here a little bit about metrics and the important metrics to follow. So the question here is, what are the most important metrics organizations should track to measure the success of an SBO implementation?
Really good question, because I always say start with the measurement in mind. It makes it a lot easier to start to put your plan together. Looking at skills coverage, really, it's the percentage of critical skills identified and addressed through hiring, upskilling, and internal mobility. So really, you're looking at what internal mobility rates do we have? Do we have employees transitioning into new roles? Do we have projects based on their skills rather than their job titles? In a lot of organizations I've worked in, we've actually measured the training to specific projects via skills as well. So we've seen an improvement in what people have learned has actually driven project success. So we show a definite correlation. Employee engagement, improvement in engagement scores, particularly in areas related to growth, development, and career opportunities. Retention of skilled employees. Decrease in turnover rates, especially high potential and highly skilled employees, and productivity metrics as well. Enhanced performance or output attributed to better skill alignment and organisational needs. And as I mentioned earlier about return on investment, quantifiable benefits of the learning programs. So really, I prefer to have learning programs that actually drive success and help people to acquire the skills, and they show that in return on investment because they're linked to a current strategy and initiative, and also that's related to their performance reviews. So if it's management training, some of the KPIs that are within the managers' performance reviews is actually linked to the training that they're doing as well. So there's a clear measurement all the way through. And I think the transparency of those measures are much easier to track when you've got AI involved in that as well. And you can start to show that to the board in terms of how we've achieved these targets, what we've been aiming for, and this is what success looks like going forward.
I think it's a very good point thinking about the ends at the beginning, basically. But I would add one thing on top of that as well. One of the things we run into having conversations about sort of adopting the model and sort of getting into this sort of skills-based project is that sometimes people just want to think of the end and see the results immediately, and it doesn't really work that way. You need to sort of go through these steps along the way. So what I would recommend is actually sort of adding the metrics that you want to check over the course of that, and having this milestone, this is where we want to be, this is what we want to measure here, measure here. Don't obviously think about the end because that's the final goal, but set up those sort of those posts along the way to sort of to see how successful it is. Yeah,
and I think also to share those positive steps as well as you achieve them, so that it doesn't just become a one-time mention program, but there's a constant update all the way through.
Exactly. And it's not I think a few of you have mentioned it, it's not a one and done sort of process. This is something fluid. So having these sort of milestones checking gives you the opportunity to pivot, or we're doing this wrong, we need to make this change. If you just go sort of with the blinders on all the way through, that's you're going to set yourself up for, obviously it might work, but you're going to set yourself up for failure if you don't think about the process
around that as well in the workforce, because if you're working in a consultancy firm, a big consultancy firm, there's projects coming in all the time. They need different skills and different types of capabilities, so you need that flexibility around that as well, but you've got to constantly be upskilling people to fulfill those needs as well.
Yeah. Okay, we will move on a little bit here. Ellen, I'm going to bring it back to you. The SBO model obviously is not a one size fits all. There's obviously companies come in all different shapes and sizes. So this question here is about the methods and how to approach it depending on the size of your organization. So question here is, I'll start with you, Ellen, and we'll bring it back to you, Hannah, for the second part. So are there differing practices or approaches to implementing a skills-based model for organizations compared to large enterprises?
Sure. I'll speak a little bit on the small size. This is, I spend a lot of time small, so I'm not an expert in like large companies implementation, but I can kind of speak on it a little bit just from based on what I know. But I spend a lot of time in small organizations. But one thing I would, before you even, regardless of the size of your organization, I think one thing we tend to overlook is Hannah mentioned change, right? So change is very difficult, but it's also scary. And I think we need to recognize that in order for us to have buy-in from all sides, one of the things we have to make sure we do as leadership is to have transparency. So a lot of times when, especially like you said, Justin, like you're like, oh, I don't want everybody knowing my skill set, or like, what if I'm not good enough compared to my peers or something like that, right? So I think just recognizing that people tend to move away from something because they're more because of fear versus they don't want to do it. So I think being transparent around how not only this is necessary for the organization, but also what does that mean for that individual, no matter how junior that person is, for every single person in the company, what does that mean for them and their development, their future career, whether they're with your organization or outside of your organization. So I think transparency is super important because uncertainty is the worst thing you can do. And we know statistically people experience a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety when uncertainty is happening, when they feel there's uncertainty around whatever's happening in organization. So I think step number one, whatever size you are, make sure you're transparent, and it's not just the information is not only provided to the top creme of the crop, your managers and so on. It needs to be from bottom up. So that's number one. I think for smaller organizations, I'm still, and maybe I'm just a little bit cynical about small organizations because I spend so much time with them, but it's always mind blowing how, what's the word I'm like, how much we lack flexibility. And I think this is where you have to be super agile and super flexible and move really fast. You have no excuse as a small company, if your employees, 100 to 200 people, for example, and you're just taking your time with things, it's inevitable that something that you're going to experience some kind of failure because you're not. To me, it's unacceptable. So if you're in a small organization and you're still struggling with the basics of like experimenting, trying new things, putting the right people kind of in the place to experiment with some of those things, I think as a small organization you have a lot more under your control versus a larger organization. So it's challenging in both, but I think small organizations have the fact that there's just less people. I mean, frankly speaking, there's just less people, and in this case, it might be more beneficial to you because you have less skills to map. Your strategic goals might be a little bit different than a larger organization. You might only be focused on one part of the world versus global conglomerates and so on. So I think that's number one, just prioritizing flexibility and being super quick on adoption, and like adopt. If it doesn't work, move on, right? Looking at cross-functional skill mapping. So looking at just all the different functions. I think also the talent mobility piece is easier in a smaller organization versus a larger one. If we're just not as siloed as smaller organizations have less silos, although they still do, obviously, than larger organizations, which allows for more of that skill mobility and just talent mobility in general and learning from different departments. So I think a small organization, I would look into that. For larger organizations, I mean, your skill mapping, your gaps it's just gonna take time. So that's like the only thing I can really say around large organization. I think it's just gonna take time, and I think you need to prepare that it's gonna take a lot longer. And also, frankly speaking, in larger organizations, and we see companies kind of cutting the fat, so to say, you have a lot of people that are just kind of hanging out because they're able to get away with just hanging out. And so you're prepared to the fact that you're gonna probably have a lot of people in an organization that are not really doing much, not really contributing, and thus it's going to be a harsh conversation to have as you're trying to figure out like what they've been doing, what skills they have, what you can prepare them for the future, and so on. I think that's a challenge as well, is that in large organizations, much easier to get away with just being there and not really contributing, versus in smaller organization, you have more relationships with your people. So you kind of, again, that talent conversation becomes a little bit easier. That skills building conversation becomes a little bit easier versus in larger organizations.
Yeah, very interesting. I just add something there before I bring it back over to you, and I want to get your thoughts on this as well. But I think you covered the small organizations very well. I'll just add one point for the larger organizations. You're 100% right when you talk about speed. And the way that you achieve speed in large organizations is you don't have to sort of bite the whole, take a whole bite out of the apple. What we do with customers that start with us, the bigger the company, they usually start with a pilot with one team or two teams, start small, 3 months, measure the results, and then you expand and go out, rather than trying to say, you know what, we're going to roll this out to 2,000 employees. Like, you're setting yourself up for failure as well. So start small. You can be quick, you can be agile, you can adjust, figure out the formula, and then sort of branch that out to the wider organization. So I think that's something to add there. But Hannah, I'd love to get your thoughts on this one as well, please.
Took the words right out of my mouth, Justin. I was going to talk about. No, you're good. From a large organization perspective, just from my background working at global organizations, the pilot is so important. Just to touch on what you said, testing that approach in small parts of the organization before blasting it out to the entire company. But the important piece of that is still being transparent about it. So you're not siloing the rest of the company that doesn't really start out with that yet. Let us know, all right, we're going to be starting this SBO model. We're going to be piloting it first with these teams. We're going to seek feedback. We're going to address KPIs, letting the rest of the organization know what's going on. Sometimes the downfall of a large organization is the communication can get lost. If you say, oh, well, I sent an email about that to the whole organization, you can't expect 500, 800, 1,000 people to all get that same message in one singular communication. So the biggest piece of it is the communication channels. They need to be frequent and they need to be varied. So maybe it's, sure, you can announce it on an all hands. Sure, you can announce it on pieces and parts of different leadership discussions, but making sure that it's really permeating through the whole organization and that there's a positive spin on it. Because as Elena said, a lot of people are really scared of change. They're reluctant to approach things differently. So as you're rolling it out, getting folks excited, getting folks motivated, and really making sure that you're letting everybody know this is coming. This is going to touch you at some point, but this is what we're doing to make it successful. And that's huge. Whereas in a smaller organization, you could have a quick CEO meeting and, in 2 to 3 different steps, you're pretty much well on your way. So that's a big difference with the large enterprise. A positive about a large enterprise is you do most likely have more, whether it's more tools, whether it's more capital, whether it's more teams to help you develop that detailed framework to categorize and map those diverse skills. So maybe you have teams that are dedicated to that. Maybe, to Tessa's point, you invest in some AI to help you with that. Those larger organizations usually have more wiggle room to play around to implement those skills and see which ones work the best. You probably have a more diverse workforce. The larger you are, you might be in different countries. You can beta test certain things across the board. You can really, probably because you have more people, right? You have a wider range of skills across different roles and departments. So you're enabling folks to, have increased talent mobility and really get more comfortable with that SBO model. And then you can create those pathways throughout AI using different tools to actually start to pinpoint where these employees are going to fall in their different roles and their different projects based on those business needs. I'm not saying you can't do that in a smaller organization. You'll just do it on a smaller scale. You can also really, in both organizations, really go back to what we were talking about earlier about decisions based on data and research. So especially in a large organization, utilizing the people team, utilizing the HR umbrella to help identify those skill gaps, help track progress, help inform those talent development initiatives. If you're at a smaller company, you may have a smaller HR team. At a larger company, you've probably got a whole bunch of people that can help you spearhead that. And just really to close out, back to what we said before about cross-functional collaboration. In a large organization, you're having all of those different pieces and parts. We've talked about this a lot, but it's very easy to get siloed in a large organization because they're almost mini organizations within themselves. So to start to break down those walls, ensure that you have that alignment with the business goals and leveraging the right folks are just some things that can really help bring together folks, even if it's a global organization all over the world.
Very interesting stuff. The communication element, I think, is really important. The thing that sprung to mind was as soon as you said that, if you announce this on an all hands, so how many people are just cooking dinner or something in the background that, write a message, I got it, but it falls on deaf ears, basically. So, finding to bite-sized groups, communication, very, very good stuff. We have our third and final poll. Thanks again, Hannah, for those responses. So I'm going to launch this third and final poll. Hopefully, we've uncovered some of the benefits of the SBO model, and this question here is exactly on that topic. So what do you see as the most significant benefit of adopting a skills-based organization model? Increased agility and in workforce planning, improved employee engagement and retention, better alignment between skills and business needs, enhanced ability to close skill gaps, and greater readiness for technological changes, or other. And we have less people than we started with, but that's usually the case. People probably on their lunch break or something like that, got to get back to work. But again, this is being recorded, so everyone will be able to catch the full recording tomorrow. It'll be on YouTube. But we have 75% participation again, so I'll let it run a little bit longer to see if we can beat it. Okay, looks like 75% is our number. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results, which should be appearing on your screen right now. So what do you see as the most significant benefit of adopting a skills-based organization model? 50% of the votes went to better alignment between skills and business needs, as we discussed. Increased agility in workforce planning with 25%, and 25% for improved employee engagement and retention, which I do believe we've kind of covered those three there. Interestingly, enhanced ability to close skill gaps didn't get any votes, but I would say unquestionably this is something that definitely can help in this area as well. But obviously you need the visibility of the skills to start with that. So we are coming to our final question of the planned discussion. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but again, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, fire them in or just drop us an email, hello@devskiller.com. Be more than happy to answer those questions. But we're going to end the webinar on the topic of emerging trends and predictions or outlook. So I'm going to go to each of you. I'll start with you, Tess. But the question here is, looking ahead, what emerging trends or technologies do you foresee having the most significant impact on the evolution of the skills-based organization?
There's quite a few, but I'm going to just name two that I see as being pretty key. I think there'll be verifiable digital credentials, validating skills and creating portable, globally recognized skills records. So I think the link between recruitment, skills and employment will become much more seamless, and I think there will be verifiable skills records that'll be available, and it'll be easier then for people to move into different organizations. And I do think that with technology advancing as it is, the skills that will be most in demand will be leadership and creative problem solving, and as we say, keeping AI will be the most important thing that we say is keep human in the loop. That's the most important thing. And at the moment, we're just about to publish a book called HR 2035, which really looks at where HR is now and where it will be in the next 10 years, and in an AI-centric culture and AI-centric workforce. So that's one of the things that we see, is there will be a massive increase in the visibility and mobility of skills going forward.
Thank you. Eleanor, what's your take on this?
Yeah, a couple of things. One I already kind of mentioned is the part about AI allowing for us to look at skills development from a holistic perspective. So I think we're moving away from this model where people just want to do this job because they want to have this skill set or they have this skill set. I think we're going to start looking at performance differently, which obviously impacts your skills and your contribution to the company and so on. So I think we're going to start being able to look at the individual as a whole versus just what can they do for us. I think, and we see this with new generations, they care much more around values that are aligning between them and the work that they're doing. It's going to be around what kind of environment they're in. Like nobody's ever again tolerating toxic environments when, like, at least my parents' generation growing up, like it was a normal to just be in a toxic environment. I think all these things are going to come into play, and AI is going to be able for us to really create that customized skill building, career pathing, if you want to call it that, for the individual, for looking at all these different factors. And the other one, I think that with the gig economy growing and more people looking, I mean, I see this all the time, more people go into that 1099s, which is just like basically like freelancer, consultant kind of roles, where they're just more individuals are looking to have that flexibility because there's more ways to monetize on your skill set than ever before. And I think that companies, and you see this already, but I think companies are going to start bringing on those contingent kind of workers more and more, and be able to, because we're moving so fast. And if you're a large organization, like Hannah was saying, it just takes time to make that change. And if you're a large organization, by the time you upskill everybody, reskill them, all those things, like, God help you, you're going to be way behind, so it's just,
the training requirements have probably changed by that point.
Exactly. So I think all of that is going to impact. And I think companies are going to be like, I need somebody to do this job today. I don't have time to train them. I don't want to train them. Maybe I don't want to spend money on them, but I just need this done. So I think this gig economy, this consultant kind of roles are going to be more and more prevalent. And I'm really excited to see how that turns out.
Yep. Anna, you want to sign us off? Do you got anything to add here?
Just quickly, from a technology perspective, as we were talking about before, I think a big change is going to be those personalized learning pathways based on the individual rather than the role. The old time model was you come in, you're a manager or you're an individual contributor, where your next step is, and there's really only training targeted to that specific role. And sometimes there's not even training. You learn from the person who was there before you. It's tribal knowledge, things like that. And I think we're going to move towards a more personalized learning pathway with AI-driven platforms that can actually tailor content, based on those skill gaps, based on the learning styles, and promote that continuous development. I think, kind of looking at how organizations used to be, it was like kind of taboo to ask, oh, can I have some extra training? Or, oh, I want to do something above and beyond what I'm doing. And now it's moving toward really, as we spoke about earlier, that culture of continuous learning, that the employees that are going to rise to the top are going to be those ones who are continuously upskilling, who are continuously flexible, and they're going to be the ones who are much more well-rounded than what used to be the model, which was just, you know, contributor to manager, and then you kind of hit the ceiling there.
Yep. Well put. And thank you all of you for the answers there. We are just about at time, so we're just about to end. I hope that we've managed to demystify the skills-based model in some way. I hope that we've been helpful, and I'm extremely grateful to you, Eleanor, Tess, and Hannah, for your insights shared today. Again, if there's any questions or you'd like to follow up with any of the information shared, or if you'd like to get in contact with our panelists as well, we're happy to share their LinkedIn, each of your LinkedIn profiles as well, to speak to each of you. And again, hello@devskiller.com. If you've got any questions for us, feel free to fire them in there. But we are exactly at the hour mark, so I'd just like to say a big thanks to all of you for joining us. And again, thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, Tess. Thank you, Hannah. Great discussion, and hope to see you all again soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Justin.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.